I recognize the honorable member for Nevis 10.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise just to make a brief intervention to the bill before this Honorable House, the Smoking Designated Areas Bill. And Madam Speaker, I think it is incumbent on me to make a presentation because we here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we are a fast developing country. And it is important that we keep pace with what is going on around us in the region and in the diaspora. And I think most of us, when we travel, we recognize that in a lot of the developed countries, there are places that are designated as smoking. And I'm not here today to speak about what people smoke. That is beside the point. I think it is important that we recognize the importance of designating areas where people can smoke if they wish to smoke. I think over the years, persons sometimes do not respect other persons. And I believe that this bill will make a change where that is concerned, where people can tolerate and respect other people in terms of their rights. Because of course, everybody argues about rights now. And everybody have rights. And so it is important that each of us respect other people's rights. There are persons who have a right to smoke, and there are persons who have a right, if they cannot tolerate the smoke, that right should be respected as well. And so that is the premise under which I make my brief intervention. That it is important that rights are recognized, rights are tolerated, and rights are respected. Now, Madam Speaker, as I said, when we travel, even when we are on the flight, we hear that this flight is a non-smoking flight. When we go to hotels, we hear there are smoking rooms, there are non-smoking rooms. And so I believe this legislation is timely, it is appropriate. And as I said, we need to keep pace with what is happening around the world. And of course, we know that we are a destination that attracts a lot of tourists as well. But I always say that whatever we do, we should not do it for the tourists, but we must do it for ourselves as well. So I believe that this legislation is targeting us as well as persons who will visit our shores. Now, Madam Speaker, as I said, I think this legislation is extremely timely. Why? Because, as I said, we need to respect each other. Now, when we look at the health implications of smoking, that is one of the main reasons why I think this bill is necessary. Because there are times when we are in public spaces, and there are times when there's smoke all around. And there are times when persons within certain areas, at certain functions, cannot tolerate the smoke. Of course, we know that there are several bad effects of secondhand smoke. The research shows that adults can get heart disease, you can get lung disease, you can get stroke. I understand in some females you can also have reproductive health issues. In children you can have asthma attacks, you can have other respiratory problems. And so it is important that persons are protected. And I believe once you have designated areas, once this legislation is enforced, it could prevent problems from occurring between persons who want to smoke and persons who do not wish to smoke. Because I've seen cases where you're at a function and there are persons who cannot tolerate the smoke, and they would get into arguments sometimes with persons who are smoking. I know as well that there are some persons who practically cannot do without the smoke. I remember when I was in college in Trinidad, there was a student in my class, and every time we had a break or every time there was a lunch break, the first thing he will do, get his cigarette. First thing he will do was to get his cigarette. There were no designated areas on campus, but he would find his little spot where he can go and indulge in his smoking. And the way I observed him, it seems as though that he absolutely couldn't do without this cigarette. It was like food for him. Because when we were gravitating towards the lunchroom to have lunch, he was gravitating somewhere else to smoke, right? And so some persons have the absolute need to indulge. And if you have that need to indulge, you should have an area where you can indulge without disturbing others and without inflicting on the rights of other people. And so, as I said, I believe that this bill is very timely. However, Madam Speaker, I would hope, because a lot of the times we come to the Assembly and we pass legislation, but it's not enforced and it's not policed. And so I'm hopeful and I'm hoping that when this legislation is passed in this Honorable House, that the legislation can be fully enforced. Because I think a lot of the times when we pass certain legislation, it tends to sometimes probably give certain people, give certain persons the right to say, well, now this legislation is passed, I can do what I want to do. That is not the intent of the legislation, and I hope that persons will not go away with that intent. If they are designated areas, they are designated areas. And so I'm hopeful that persons can respect the legislation. I'm hopeful that businesses who will apply for the licenses will respect. I'm hopeful that the businesses who will apply for the license will have the areas clearly marked, as they are when we visit other countries. The areas must be clearly marked. And of course, the legislation also sets out the penalties. And so I'm hopeful that once it is passed, the penalties as well could be brought to bear on those who do not respect and those who do not do what the bill says that they should do. And so, Madam Speaker, as I said, I think the bill is timely. I think it's pretty comprehensive. It's a short bill, but I think that it makes provision for practically everything. Who should get a license, what you need to do to get the license, the cost of the license, the penalties, and so on. And so all the players need to do what they have to do. And I think once that is done, I think we can all live in peace and harmony. I want to say that I think the bill should have probably, this is something should have been passed in the Assembly a long time ago. As I said, we need to keep pace with what is happening globally, and I welcome the legislation. I support it, and I want to wish it safe passage to this Honourable House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for Nevis 10.